All right, let's move on to Saturday and try to find some winners. Buy low spot. I'll let you kick it off. What do you got?
Let's go West Virginia at home, taking on Texas Tech, coming off that emotional win against Texas. This is a really good spot for West Virginia, who's lost 5 straight. They almost upset Baylor in Waco on Monday night. They actually led by 10 early in the second half, but ended up collapsing. They've played a very difficult schedule during their losing streak. They lost to Kansas, Baylor twice, Texas Tech on the road, which they should have actually covered. And they should actually covered on the road in Lubbock, and then Oklahoma and Arkansas. Texas Tech didn't handle the press very well the first time that they faced West Virginia. They're bottom half of college basketball in press offense, and West Virginia is also 16th in turnover percentage, while Texas Tech is around 240th offensively. And Tech just has had a ton of fortunate bounces, especially in that Texas game. O'Banner had 2 bricks that ended up going in.
Crazy.
Yeah. In the game against Texas, they only allowed the Longhorns to shoot 28% from behind the arc. It's a team that's kind of due for a little bit of negative regression. Ken Palm has set Texas Tech -5. I would love to get West Virginia at +5, but I would play them down to +4. I think it's just a good spot for the Mountaineers to potentially either end their losing streak or play Texas Tech really tough at home.
Yeah, I this one circled to a great buy low, sell high spot. West Virginia's seen a lot of these defenses, these no middle. They have some guards who can shoot and score consistently and get hot. From the mid-range or outside, and McNeil and Sherman. The key is, and West Virginia, we mentioned Texas Tech. West Virginia is also one of the best home court advantages in all of college basketball. This should be a rowdy environment, and they need this game. They're sitting right probably, I think on bracket matrix on the 12 line, and they absolutely need it. And Texas Tech coming off that emotional win. We've seen them on the road, slip up a couple times. They haven't been, that impressive on the road. They did win at Baylor, but their other road games this year, they lost at Providence. They lost at Iowa State, and they lost at Kansas State and then at Kansas. So they haven't been, that's it. I mean, they're 1-4 on the road, played some good teams, but they haven't been a juggernaut. And obviously they have one of the best home court advantages in college basketball, as does West Virginia. The key though is Taz Sherman. He's in concussion protocol. He has to play. They need him specifically for this matchup. He was cooking against Baylor before he got, they might have won that game if he didn't go out. He got hit in the face, no foul call. And he's in concussion protocol. Huggins didn't offer any sort of insight. He just said, well, we don't know, as you would expect from him. So keep your eye on his status. He's massive. And if he gets announced in, it's just a great spot regardless. Maybe the line would adjust without him. But I really like it if he's in. And I would imagine if there's any chance, he's going to try to give it a go. All right, I'll go with Florida State against Wake Forest. They've lost 3 straight. As of right now, I think they're out of the tournament. If the season ended today, and I think per bracket matrix, they're out, which is crazy to say for Florida State. They've lost 3 in a row, and this is just a hype home spot against Wake Forest, who, by the way, they lost revenge angle too. They lost to at Wake by 22, I think. Shot quality made that game 75.1 to 74.9. It was basically a dead even game. Florida State's also shooting just 31% from 3 in ACC play. They're allowing opponents in ACC play to shoot 39.5%. So I think that they're 14th in the league in both. I think there could be a little correction there. It's not a vintage Florida State perimeter defense, but I'd expect home hype spot must win that their perimeter D will be as good as you'll see it all year, similar to when they beat Duke at home. And everyone continues to make every single open shot against Florida State. And I don't think that'll necessarily continue. They rank 355th nationally, out of 358 teams in points per possession allowed on unguarded catch and shoot jumpers in the half court. I can't imagine that lasts. Wake Forest has turnover issues. They're 14th in the ACC in conference play. Florida State can exploit that. They're going to press. I think they pressed the second highest rate in the country. Wake Forest, meh, against the press this year. And Florida State, they've had some injuries. They lost Osborne. They lost another 7-footer. but I think this is just a great spot for a desperate young team at home. Sell high. Where are you going?
I'm going to go with one of the biggest hold your nose plays on the entire Saturday board. I'm going to sell high in Auburn on the road at Georgia on Saturday. Auburn's 21-1. I don't think they're that as good as their record indicates. This is an ultimate sandwich spot for them. They coming off that emotional rivalry win against Alabama where they put up 100 points. And like Colin already mentioned, coming to Bud Walton Arena on Tuesday night to play his Razorbacks. Georgia has been a tad unlucky. They're due for a little positive regression. Defensively, they actually have a positive adjusted efficiency differential on shot quality when they have around -3 on KenPom. Georgia did lose to Auburn by 23 a few weeks ago, but they did hold the Tigers.
I was on them plus 22.5. Missed a free throw to cover.
Yeah, I mean, they did hold Auburn to 10 of 36 from behind the arc, and they just allowed too many offensive rebounds and turned the ball over too many times. Georgia, speaking of free throws, does get to the free throw line at the 14th highest rate in the country, while Auburn is 250th in free throw rate on defense. So this is a big time hold your nose spot. KenPom has it at Auburn -19. So I'd love it at that, but I'll play any Georgia, anything plus 16 or better.
Yeah, if I can get 19, 20, I think I would have to join you on the spot alone. Really high backdoor risk as well, as we saw in the first matchup. Unfortunately, Auburn wouldn't let him get a layup. I thought it was a flagger. They didn't call the flagger and then missed free throw. Yeah, the one thing that scares me, Georgia's transition defense is they're in the 1 percentile nationally.
Yeah, they're bad.
That's scary against Auburn, but yeah, the number and the spot, you're not asking them to win or lose by single digits. I don't hate it. Sell high. I'm going to go Michigan State. They are, look, I think that they're 17-4 shot quality, by the way, has them at 12-9. The team that's stolen a bunch of wins late, and they did again at Maryland in a game. I think shot quality had them losing. And they won on a last second layup, and they have a Tuesday matchup with Wisconsin, huge game in the Big Ten standings. And I think the market is just overvaluing this Michigan State team, which it's just not, Christie's playing a lot better, but it's just not the most talented offensive team in the country. They're also running really well from three in league play on offense and defense. I think there's some regression coming there. And Rutgers at home has been just a different team at the rack. You should have a good crowd in Piscataway. So I'm going to sell Michigan State, I think 6 of their last 7 of games have been shot quality losses. Just crazy.
Yeah.
Even that Michigan game, it's wild. All right. Home dog Saturday. What do you got?
Well, we're on the same page once again, because I had Rutgers circled as my home dog against Michigan State. You wrote, if people haven't read it yet, you wrote a wonderful article on positive and negative regression teams going forward. And obviously Michigan State was one of those teams due for negative regression. I'm going to pluck a little stat from your article
Sure.
that basically Michigan State first in the Big Ten in 3-point field goal percentage and free throw percentage on both offense and defense. That is one of those indicators that's just not sustainable. Also, shot quality tracks rim and 3-point rate, which is essentially the 2 most valuable shots in half-court offense. Michigan State is 319th in that category, meaning they're just relying on a lot of mid-range jumpers more than they should in half-court offense. Michigan State also spends a ton of time in transition, but they're not really effective. They're bottom 40% of college basketball in points per possession, while Rutgers is 5th in the Big Ten in defensive transition. So I'm with you. I think this is a great spot to fade Michigan State once again. KenPom, I believe, has it at Michigan State -5. So I love it at that, but I'll play Rutgers down to +3.
Yeah, Rutgers, they can have turnover issues at times. Michigan State won't exploit that, and Michigan State does have turnover issues. It's one of their biggest weaknesses on the offensive side of the ball, besides quality of shot, and that's something that Rutgers can exploit. So I think the Scarlet Knights will have value as a home dog. All right, let's go to any other spots, and I'll start. I had Indiana. This is probably the sandwich spot of the day. And Illinois comes off that huge win against Wisconsin. And they have a revenge date with Purdue on Tuesday. Before that, they have to go to Assembly Hall. Indiana, who's 9-3 against the spread at home this year, has already beat Purdue, already beat Ohio State at home. I think they get Illinois here. I think they'll be a really short home dog. They don't. Rob Finney won't play. Heard a little bit on the defensive end, but I think they have enough depth to compensate. I really like how they finally got a road win and cover in conference. It was. I think they can carry over that momentum from last Saturday. By the way, they had a week off to prepare and rest. Meanwhile, Illinois played Wisconsin on Wednesday. Hoosiers also excellent at defending in the post, 93rd percentile percentage. That's huge against Kofi and company. And I think Indiana can get some easy buckets in transition, which will keep the crowd really engaged. They're actually top 10 in the country in points per possession in transition per synergy. Illinois' transition defense, extremely shaky, 27th percentile. So, yeah, I think just the spot here. I mean, after Wisconsin, before Purdue, at Assembly Hall, post defense is there. I could see Kofi getting into foul trouble. It just screams Indiana home win in a hype spot. Give me the Hoosiers. What do you got?
I'll go Texas at home against Iowa State. This is a wonderful revenge spot for Texas. Obviously, they came off that emotional rivalry loss in Lubbock. I don't think you can really blame them. That was just an insane atmosphere and all the off the court things with Chris Beard and everything. It was just a horrible, horrible spot for Texas. So I can't really blame them for, losing by double digits in Lubbock. This game, though, Iowa State beat Texas back in Ames on January 15th by 9. But the shot quality was basically 50-50. Kalsher just made a ton of ridiculous shots. Iowa State shot 45% from behind the arc when they only shoot about 32% for the season. And Texas just turned the ball over 20 times. So it was just a really, really bad game for them. The key in this game for Texas is they got to control the pace. They play one of the slowest paces in the country, the 347th in adjusted tempo, and they're 7th in the country in points per possession allowed in half-court defense. Iowa State's in the bottom 30% of college basketball in points per possession in half-court, but they're very, very good in transition. Texas should be able to dominate inside on Iowa State. In conference play, Iowa State's allowing close to 57% from inside the arc. They have the worst free throw rate allowed in the Big 12. Texas third in free throw rate in the conference. They're making a little over 77% of their free throws. This is just a good spot for Texas coming off that loss. Hopefully they can find their offense after a couple dud performances against Texas Tech and Tennessee, who are two of the better defenses in the country. Ken Palm has it at Texas -6. I would love it at that, but I'll play the Longhorns anything up to -7.5.
I'm going to mention Tulsa. They are going to Temple. Little revenge spot here. Temple's been playing a little better of late, but Tulsa, they're 7-13 on the year. They're in the bottom of the AAC. They're 1-8 in league play. However, I think they're a lot better than the record indicates. They're 1-8 in games decided by 5 points or less. They have 5 conference losses by a combined 17 points against Memphis twice, Houston, Temple, and SMU. They've had some crazy second half comebacks, but they also led by 15 in the second half against Memphis. And opponents have been shooting 37.7% from 3 on the year against Tulsa. That's 330th in the country. In conference play, that's 38.7. Zone heavy defense, and just look, that's even worse because they give up a ton of threes in their zone, and they give up, I think, the 340th for as far as 3-point rate. They rank 340th in the country. Should see a downward trend, and what gives me a lot of confidence is Frank Haith has been there forever. If you look back at his defenses at Tulsa, like here are the percentages: 33.3, 35.9, 35.9, 34.3, 32.8, 29.9, 34.1. Average like right around 33.5%. No single season above 36. And they're at close to 38, 39 in league play. So I think you should see some regression there. Temple, not a good zone offense. They are, not good in isolation. They're not a great shooting team. So I think that this is a pretty good matchup for Tulsa, who I think should grind this game and stay. Let's see. Ken Palm has this. Yeah, Tulsa +5, which I would love to get. Temple is, I mean, they shoot 30% from three on the year, 29% in league play, and that's not a regression thing. That's they can't shoot. They just don't have great shooters on that team. And they lost Khalif Battle, who was their best shooter. And on the other side, Temple in conference plays teams are only shooting 26.7% from three. So you could see some regression in that aspect. The first matchup, Temple ended up winning 69-64, even though Tulsa led by 5 in the second half at the under 12 timeout. And Tulsa shot 6 of 23 from three, 26%. And then, Temple was at 35% from three and 83% from the line. And they ended up winning by 5. So I think it's a good spot here to get Tulsa after their loss to Wichita State. I think they'll have a good shot to win this game. You got anything else?
Yeah, I wouldn't be doing my duty as an Iowan and a Des Moines native if I didn't talk about Northern Iowa versus Drake on Saturday. I like Drake in this spot at home with the Knapp Center. UNI has been just shooting the lights out in conference play. 36% from behind the arc, 56% from 2-point range, over 80% from the free throw line. They're due to come back down to earth a little bit. This is a kind of a revenge spot for them. They had an epic collapse in Cedar Falls against Drake on January 22nd. They're up 10 with 3.5 minutes left to go and ended up losing in overtime. And Drake was without one of their best players, Tank Hampel. With that being said, Hampel is back. Drake won.
I think Drake won that game. Drake won that game in overtime, I think.
Yeah, they did. Drake won by 6 or 7 in overtime. But yeah, it was an epic collapse by UNI. Hampel's back for Drake, and they look much, much better, adding another score to their lineup. Yep. They beat Loyola this past Sunday by 9 at the Knapp Center.
That follow-up win at Indiana State was really impressive after the Loyola win.
Yeah, they just destroyed them on the road on Wednesday.
Yeah.
And Indiana State had
back.
Yep, they had Cooper Neese back and everything. Yeah, it was just impressive. The biggest thing, UNI, biggest thing in the last matchup against Drake, and really overall for the season, is UNI is just allowing teams to get to the rim against them. Drake shoots over 60% from inside the arc. They in that last matchup, they only went 6 of 26 from 3-point range when they usually shoot 35% for the season. So this is a rare spot where it's almost like you're selling high on both teams, because UNI just shot the lights out against Bradley on Wednesday night. But with Drake having Hampel back, adding another scoring option, the UNI defense, which is third to last in the MVC in points per possession allowed in half-court defense, I think this is a good spot for Drake at home in Des Moines. So I like the Bulldogs. Ken Palm has it at -3. So I love the Bulldogs at -3, but I'll play up to -4.
Talk some of the marquee games. You have Baylor, Kansas, but there's a lot of uncertainty on who's going to play. So we'll have a preview for that game up on Action Network app. Agbaji status unknown. He went into COVID protocols. Baylor has a bunch of injuries you want to keep your eye on. But just so many super games on Saturday. Kentucky, Alabama. I'm going to be tempted to take Alabama as a home dog. In these home hype spots, I mean, it's a team that has wins, just the most impressive wins in the country. I think they might be getting like 3.5 here. The offensive glass for Kentucky does scare me against Alabama. But if you look, I mean, Kentucky offensive rebounding and league play hasn't been that great. You still have Sheboy in there. The transition offense of Kentucky scares me a bit. And, the Alabama transition defense. Kentucky, I think, is getting out in transition the second highest frequency in the country. But this Alabama team they're going to look, they've been great in these home hype spots. It's going to be an electric atmosphere against Kentucky. They're going to make shots eventually as a team. They shoot threes at a ridiculous rate. They're 48% 3-point rate in conference. They're 47% on the season, which is top 20. It's a high variance team, but they're only shooting 31% on the year, 28% in conference play. So I think that this could be a good spot. I mean, Kentucky's been scary in these great spots, but I could see Alabama pulling this out after that really embarrassing Auburn loss. Any thoughts on Alabama, Kentucky?
Yeah, I'm very, very interested to see where this line ends up, because what happens typically with Alabama, because they have such a good home court advantage and they played so well at home over the past 2 years under Nate Oates, against Auburn, they opened around a pick 'em and then, it closed at -3 against LSU when they were on their high. It opened around a pick 'em and closed at Alabama -3.5. So I wouldn't be surprised to see it just open up at straight, Kentucky -3, but I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy, but there's a potential Alabama could be favored where this line closes, and all those matchup problems that you mentioned against Kentucky. It's tough because Alabama's lost twice in the last 2 years at home, once to Auburn, and last year they lost in the non-conference to Western Kentucky, which was I didn't realize that, which was kind of shocking to look at, but. Yeah, it's going to be hard for me especially if you're getting Alabama +3, +3.5, to not take the Tide, given how good they've been at home. But I am very interested to see where this line ends up. And if Kentucky potentially becomes a underdog, I think I might have to take the Wildcats, because that performance at Kansas does give me a lot of confidence in them, especially after they lost to Auburn. Obviously, they had some injuries with that, but when Kentucky's finally fully healthy, playing on the road against a good team, they, destroying Kansas gives me confidence. So I'll see where this line ends up. If Kentucky somehow becomes an underdog, which I don't think they will, I'll play them. But other than that, I'm probably going to pass, given all these matchup issues for Alabama.
Duke, North Carolina, which is the most storied rivalry in arguably all of sports, that will headline the day. Carolina swept this season series last year, I believe. Let me double check before I say that. Yeah, Duke lost 91-87 at home, and then they lost 91-73 on the road. This is obviously a much better Duke team. Those two teams were pretty similar last year. In both games last year, Duke fans will recall that Caleb Love went, I think, was it Caleb, or I think Walton and Caleb? Yeah, Caleb Love went nuts in both games. It's a really fascinating game, because if you look at Carolina, who just stole a game at Louisville on 8, I don't know.
Crazy.
I don't know how their resume looked, but that was a win they needed. I don't know.
I'm still really mad about that game
because do you have Louisville?
I had Louisville. I'm still very mad. It's one of the worst refereeing performances in overtime
on the road too. It wasn't like it was in Chapel Hill. But if you look at North Carolina this year, they've had some duds, specifically on defense, but they've all come away from home. Like, they played Kentucky on the neutral. Kentucky put up 98. Purdue put up 93 on the neutral. Tennessee put up 89 on the neutral. Notre Dame put up 78 on them on the road. Miami 85 on the road. Wake Forest 98 on the road. But if you look at home, no one has gotten to out past 70 except NC State in garbage time when UNC was up by like 30 in that game. I think Brown was the only other team in like the first or second game of the year when UNC's defense was lost. But at home, their defense has been tremendous of late. Their offense as well. They're just a different team in Chapel Hill. Duke was shaky on the road, young team earlier in the year, but they did, beat Louisville. The game was close, and then they had a really impressive effort at Notre Dame when they completely shut down the Irish. One of the things that I like about this North Carolina team of late is, Leaky Black is playing a lot better on the defensive side of the ball. He's more confident offensively as well. Same with RJ Davis, and they're able to kind of not put as much on Caleb Love and let him do his thing. The focal point is obviously going to be Baycott underneath, and how does Mark Williams match up with him? That's going to be a huge storyline here. On the other side of the ball, the question for Duke is, or for Carolina defensively, is who's going to cover Banchero? Like, is it Manick? Because if so, that's a nightmare matchup that Banchero could really take advantage of. If you don't, though, it's like you have AJ Griffin you got to worry about too, is hitting 50% from three. So that's one of the matchup problems that Duke poses. One of the things, if you look at this from a matchup perspective, is that Carolina almost annually will dominate the offensive glass. It used to be more pronounced than it is now, but they're still very strong there. They're fourth in league play on the offensive glass. And that's an area that Duke is surprisingly struggle with on their defensive glass. So can Baycott dominate inside with Mark Williams' defense? And then how many offensive rebounds can they get? You would think that if Baycott is dominating inside, that Duke might go to that 2-3 zone and then force Carolina to shoot. But Carolina is like shooting extremely well this year. They're 15th in the country in 3-point percentage. Carolina is not going to turn Duke over at all. They're 356th in turnover rate. Duke's top 15 in that department. But that's kind of like you weren't turning anyone over anyway. Duke is taking care of the ball anyway. So I actually think that's a net positive for Carolina. So intriguing matchup here. Carolina projected on KenPom to lose by 3. Playing really well at home. It's Coach K's last trip to Chapel Hill, and it's Hubert Davis's first as a head coach in this rivalry. What do you see here?
Yeah, I am actually going to be interested in the total for this one. So KenPom has it 79-76. So that's what 155, I believe, is a total. And if I'm doing my math right, like you mentioned, there's so many matchup problems, I think, for Duke defensively. In your article that you wrote earlier this week, I'm going to pluck another stat from it. Duke, 50% of the 3-pointers they allow are unguarded. Like, that's crazy. Teams just aren't shooting a high percentage against them. And like you mentioned, North Carolina, 15th in the country in 3-point field goal percentage. So they could just shoot the lights out against Duke and potentially not necessarily run away with this, but, put up a big time numbers like we saw in those 2 matchups last year. So North Carolina obviously plays a very, very fast tempo. Duke is a little bit above average. So my guess with this game being in Chapel Hill, North Carolina is going to be able to somewhat control the pace and force Duke into a track meet. Yeah, I'm concerned that for Duke that Baycott's just going to dominate the offensive glass. Duke is 12th in the ACC in defensive rebounding percentage and league play. So that's obviously very concerning. But on the flip side, North Carolina, like you mentioned, they have been playing better at home defensively, but really the 2 things they do well is they rebound and they prevent teams from getting the free throw line. But they're very average everywhere else. And they're actually in the bottom 25% of college basketball in points per possession allowed in half court defense. So it's going to be hard for me to stay away from the over on this one. I really hope we can get 155 or lower. But I'll probably end up just playing the over in this game.
All right. We'll have a preview for on actionnetwork.com and the Action Network app. Any other games you want to mention or talk about before we get out of here?
USC Arizona is kind of interesting. I think on Saturday, might be potentially a good spot for USC with Arizona coming off the game.
If Arizona beats UCLA and Arizona State, and then Arizona State upsets USC,
it'd be perfect. KenPom has it at -11. The thing about Arizona is they obviously have a ton of size, but USC is going to be able to match that size like not a lot of teams have done to Arizona this season. USC's number 1 team in the country in field goal percentage allowed at the rim. So it's gonna be very hard for Arizona to get their usual buckets in close. USC plays on the road against Arizona State tonight. So we'll see what happens in that one. But with Arizona, even Tommy Lloyd, he even came out and said after the loss to UCLA that his guys were just gassed and exhausted from the season. He gave them a ton of, some time off. They didn't look good against Arizona State. And this past weekend on Saturday, Arizona State was up 1 with 12 minutes left to go in the game. They just, collapsed at the end. So I think it's a pretty good spot for USC is going to be able to match the size of Arizona. So KenPom has it at -11. I'll take hopefully we get USC something in the double digits.
Yeah, I also think Michigan double digits against Purdue. They actually think they match up pretty well. Really desperate spot for them too. They have the size inside, but Purdue doesn't run a lot of pick and roll or isolation. That's what really Michigan struggled to defend. And I think that Michigan on the other end can take advantage of some of Purdue's weaknesses on the perimeter. I'll have something written up for that game.